Oh, if you don't have anything on the agenda. You're fine. You're not fine.
Cool. Ready to head out to Sturgis and stuff like that? I will, right? Friday, I think, no, we didn't. I live in Friday, California. It's the end of my. Procurement. Oh gosh. This is pretty much. I figured I'd wear blue stripes. I think I'd wear these. That's too much. Pinstripes, I forgot my main case. Yeah. So, yeah. I
have a funny thing that happened on the train. Passenger left behind the plastic bags filled with their medical marijuana. Yeah, Allied was very good. They dealt with it. Yeah, I guess they called the supervisor and everybody said, you know. Yeah, no, they were right in front of me having the whole conversation. How do I deal with this? It's interesting.
Gotta come in here. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't remember that.
Hey, Jody, how are you?
Are you? We change it every month. Hey,
Yeah, no, they actually changed that. That's how.
Yeah, there was.
Carolyn, careful. Share,
So that's bad. Are you talking? Well, it shows a plan, but it's not like. That.
Well. Find the highs.
Oh, gosh, no.
Oh, yeah.
That's why. That's why. Started. That's why. Morning.
How are you?
If we could just like all collectively agree to ditch them. I think that- Read about it. Yeah, that's been, reading. I never be the one without the food. They know me.
Yeah.
You're.
I'm done for your.
I mean, maybe stress, remember, I find sometimes it's easier just to.
I read. Yeah. Not that sort of.
But my mind. Yeah. Okay, I read that. Oh. Yes. I haven't actually read the article. Yeah, that's all right. Welcome back. Oh, thanks.
We tried to look at something like that, but I don't even know. Stars. I didn't write. Makes sense.
Right.
I know you.
I did. I did.
Yeah, no, not what numbers you.
Settling in.
It's 16%.
Presenting, I
wrote it.
But we haven't advertised, but it's
Region.
We have a no ties. No ties. Tyler has.
You can't be smart. When I was over in Dallas.
He knows where our money is.
Me and Bradley, I try to hit one of the colors.
I don't know, I'm like, is it? All right. All about what color it is.
Oh, yes. No, that's funny.
Is there a? I'd like to get out of this.
But the service would have.
Maybe. That's us question. Probably should be.
Oh, yeah. I said that one. He enjoyed that tour. So there, I was there. It was very. Yeah, she's got a reading on the books on the floor, but yeah. Do it again.
I'll go back tonight. So far.
The most amount.
Yes.
I have to spend as much time. Trying to get us.
We have seats.
Are gonna work.
I know that.
I always, yeah, I always have to bring this. It's an accessibility feature. Oh, I can't stand.
Based off of monthly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. Mayor, budget and funds, great voting rights for projects on Saturday. Yeah. Thank you.
I sure like what you saw, just gonna hang
Yeah.
out. I know it was there when I.
I think they'll.
Ready.
All right, welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask Pat Dillon to call the roll.
Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. Ron Corbin, City of Avondale, or Harold Hastings.
This is Harold, president.
Thank you. We're gonna figure out the echo. Dan Codman, City of Buckeye. Brian Peters, City of Chandler.
Here.
Autumn Groom, City of El Mirage. Dave Trimble, Town of Fountain Hills.
Here.
Mary Goodman, Town of Gilbert. Here. Kevin Phelps, City of Glendale. Lynette Reed, City of Goodyear. Elijah Levon or Sean Pierce from Maricopa County.
Sean Pierce in attendance.
Jody Sorrell, City of Mesa. Here. Kevin Burke, City of Peoria.
Here.
Mario Paniagua, City of Phoenix.
Here.
Bruce Gardner, Town of Queen Creek. I see him on the WebEx. City of Scottsdale, Mark Melanchenko.
Here.
City of Surprise, Kristen Taylor. City of Tempe, Rose. Sorry.
No worries.
Rosen
Chowsty. Here, thank you.
And City of Tolleson, Reyes Medrano. Chair, we're ready to begin.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Just a reminder, if a committee member would like to ask a question or make a comment during the meeting, please type your comment in the box and it will be read aloud and answered. And then also a reminder to all attendees to mute your microphone on your computer or phone if you're attending virtually. Item number 1, public comment. The public will be provided with an opportunity at this time to address the committee on non-agenda items and all action agenda items for the joint RPTA and VMR meeting agendas. Up to 3 minutes will be provided per speaker unless the chair allows more at my discretion. A total of 15 minutes for all speakers will be provided. Pat, do we have any public comment?
Mr. Crowley?
Okay, Mr. Crowley?
unless you want me to go on forever, I do like the restraints that this does put on me, and it's not operating. Thank you. I found a stain this morning and when I was doing 2 readings. It's back on, thank you. The first was the front page of the paper, and I'd ask if any of y'all happen to see it. It only had to do with the legislature, the governor, and the passing of Prop 400, and then breaking it down into some of the negativities that occurred. But the part that I started chortling at was when it said that of the $14.9 billion, 37% is going to go to transit. I would have liked it more at 40, but then 3.5% of that is going to go to rail. Now, is that 3.5% of the 37? Or is that 3.5% of the 14 billion? But when I extrapolate that down and did a little fast numbers, I went 36 million a year for light rail for you to maintain the system. And then I look at what you have in here for rail as a joint committee, what you're trying to do. I go, how are you going to pay for what you're saying you're planning and doing when all you're going to get is 36 million a year? And I go, well, are your tentacles going to go back into reach into the bus part of it, being that how many people do we have doing planning? And how many of them are planning the rail part? In fact, you wanted to hire 60 more people to keep on doing what? Because every dime you don't spend on getting me a bus, a route, or a stop done, with as long as it's been, I think you're stealing. You know, it's been 20 years that you have been getting money to expand and do the system. You've got route changes coming in here. Where are the ones that you showed from the document of 06? I know you did the cutbacks in that. One of them, Queen Creek, Litchfield Road, those are ones that are supposed to be done this year. And you didn't take the Litchfield out of the whole system, but where were the buses last year acquired for it? Where is the planning and routing in that? Because it's not done. So when you do recommend to the board the route changes, please realize that you haven't been doing the job for 20 years and you need a lot of catching up to do. And when it comes to spending money on rail, you need to bifurcate the agencies so that it's not as convoluted as what rail would like.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crowley. Do we have any other public comment? Nope. All right, I'd like to move on to item number 2, Chief Executive Officer's report. Calling Jessica Miller.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We've got a number of exciting projects and programs going on at Valley Metro that I want to provide you with updates on. But first, I want to recognize the collaboration and the partnership that has taken place for these really past 2 years, working to advance the enabling legislation for Prop 400 extension over the finish line at the state legislature on Monday. This was a great success. It took months, years of collaboration, conversations, concessions certainly were made, but we are delighted that we will have the opportunity to present this to the voters in 2024. Highlights of that include 40.5% of the bill for freeways, 37% for transit. And I want to note that is an increase from the current 33% of the half-cent sales tax in Prop 400 that is devoted to transit, of which Of the 37%, to answer Mr. Crowley's question, 3.5% would be eligible for rail system maintenance. That includes maintaining our track, overhead catenary system, vehicles, including light rail vehicle replacement, which will occur in the horizon of the extension of Proposition 400. We look forward to working with our member cities to design and deliver the mobility services that will be supported by Proposition 400. So special thanks and I think a week of celebration for us all. Other things happening in Valley Metro. I just came from our Operations and Maintenance Center where we had the opportunity to participate in a press event with Senator Mark Kelly, Mayor Gallego, and businesses from across Arizona that are engaged in delivering clean energy. Valley Metro is working to create a more environmentally and financially sustainable transit operation. About a year ago, we began what's called our fleet transition plan. So that's a plan, it's a formal plan, and is now required by the Federal Transit Administration that documents in detail how we would transition from our current fleet, which is primarily compressed natural gas, about 78%. We have some diesel vehicles as well, to renewable energy sources. We completed that plan. We submitted an application to FTA's low or no vehicle emissions program. And this summer, we were notified that we will receive an award of $13.3 million. Those funds, combined with other congressionally directed funds that we were previously awarded and a hopeful additional award that we're still awaiting news on, combined with about $2.1 million in Proposition 400 regional funds, will support our initial deployment. Next slide, please, Stephanie, of battery electric buses. The low or no vehicle emissions application in itself is expected to fund 20 battery electric buses and 12 sets of charging infrastructure. It will also require significant facility modifications, including power runs to the Tempe bus operations and maintenance facility and Mesa bus operations and maintenance facility. We're going to be working very closely with your city staff as we design the implementation plan. We did complete that fleet transition plan with the assistance of WSP, and they're on board with us just a little bit longer, and then we'll take it from here. So good news. Speaking of climate resiliency, we've got quite a heat relief program at Valley Metro. I know we have been in national news because it does indeed get hot here in the desert. A couple of things I want you to know: that in terms of our equipment, our vehicles, our facilities, we are built for this. We had small increases in the number of bus failures due to air conditioning issues over our hottest days, but by and large, we have been delivering our service as scheduled to our customers. We're also supporting our customers and our team members who are in the field and exposed to heat. Our heat relief program, by the way, runs from about May 1 until September 30th. We are out in the field delivering coolers, fans to our customers at bus stops and rail stations. On the South Central Light Rail Construction Project, we've also erected 34 additional shade structures this year. It's especially challenging because the normal bus stops with shade structures have largely been removed to support construction on the central corridor. So we've got a great partnership with the City of Phoenix and Kiewit, our contractor, to deliver that service. We're also preparing our team members. We've shifted some of our inspections to be earlier in the morning. We're delivering buckets of water to them. They also have water backpacks and electrolyte packets to help keep them safe. Construction project updates. We've got a couple of big milestones I want to share with you. On our Northwest Extension Phase 2, last week we hit a major milestone. It's called construction substantial completion. Right now we're sitting at about 91% complete. These views, by the way, on the left, it is the elevated station at Metro Center, a side view, and then a platform level view at Metro Center. The station itself is complete, and now we're finishing the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and some of the decorative touches, including the art. We had great art coverage this summer about the Northwest 2 project. Really good stories to tell. We have completed the majority of the road work, so that means all of those barricades that have been in place for a few years now have been largely lifted. This is the 25th and Dunlap station, and the picture on the bottom is the Mountain View and 25th Avenue station. We are already in our pre-revenue service testing and safety programs, and we are looking to an early 2024 opening date for Northwest Phase 2. Meanwhile, on the South Central project, we are now sitting at 70% completion. Most of the project resources have lifted from the northern end of the project here in downtown to the southern end, and this is a view looking south from First Avenue, heading out of downtown. This is actually our Lincoln and First station, so you can see that we're deep in the roadway work, also working with a lot of third-party utilities at this time. Roadway station improvements, and then the construction of our traction power substations is happening on the southern end. We have mentioned this, but we are hosting a major conference here in Phoenix. We are delighted to be the host of the Impact Conference, November 5th through 8th. Impact is the former Railvolution conference. It has been around for decades, and it really is a conference that focuses on not just transit investment in the capital projects, but really the impacts on the community, including transit-oriented development. This conference will include a number of mobile workshops, 60 mobile workshops and different sessions. We're working closely with our city staff. We've got a local host committee. We have a lot of great stories to tell here in the Valley about the positive impacts of transit. This is also an opportunity for us to come together and learn from experts, but also community members and advocates from across the United States. Next. We've had some changes to our team. You have probably seen emails from me, but I just want to congratulate officially Tom Young, who has been promoted to our Deputy Chief of Bus and Paratransit Operations. Welcome, Tom. Tom has been with Valley Metro over 2 years now. He was previously director of our Accessible Transportation Services program. He will continue to lead accessible transportation service, but also will lead bus service. And Tom is part of our transportation team, which is led by our Chief Transportation Officer, Mike Powell, who joined us in May. Next slide, please. We're also have the pleasure of welcoming Darren Curry, now I think 3 weeks ago nearly, as our Chief Maintenance Officer. Darren will oversee maintenance of all of our transit assets. That includes vehicles, as well as our rail infrastructure. That's maintenance of way, tracks, stations, signals, overhead catenary system, as well as all of our operating facilities. We have a couple of more positions to fill, including our Deputy Chief for Rail Operations. We're interviewing for that role right now. We will soon post a management position that will supervise the maintenance of our road fleet, our buses, and our vans. That's the only new position that was a budget add. Each of the other positions have been either backfills or repurposing vacant positions. I am delighted to at last fill out our stronger operations and maintenance team. Just a quick look ahead. We will be here tomorrow for Audit Finance Subcommittee and our Board of Directors on August 17th. At this time, we're scheduled September 6th for TMC RMC, September 7th for AFS, and September 21st for our Board of Directors meeting. This concludes my report, Mr. Chair. Are there any questions I may answer?
Are there any questions? All right, thank you, Jessica. And I'd also like to thank you and congratulate you on your team and the MAG team and all the professional staff and elected officials from around the Valley on the efforts on Prop 400. It's quite the achievement. I know countless hours were spent, negotiating with legislators and crunching numbers and educating and all of that. So I appreciate your efforts and your team's efforts. Thank you. All right, item number 3, the consent agenda is presented for action. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Thank you. Are there any questions on any items that need to be pulled for separate discussion? Okay, with that, I'll request a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Item number 4, travel expenditures and solicitations. This item is presented for information only. Are there any questions on this information item? Okay. Number 5, are there any reports on current events or any requests for future agenda items? Okay, seeing none. Next meeting of the TMC RMC joint meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 6th at 11 a.m. Now I'd like to call the TMC meeting to order. Consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda or items that need to be pulled for separate discussion? If not, I'll request a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Item number 2, the Transit Life Cycle Program Policy Change Recommendation. I'm going to ask Jessica Mefford-Miller to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to call Tyler Olson, our Manager of Budget, to the podium to provide a presentation. Tyler?
We're having trouble with the microphone.
No worries, thanks.
Try now, Tyler.
Good morning. I'm here today to discuss the recommended transit life cycle program policy change. So, what is the transit life cycle program? It's really what governs the transit component of our current 20-year Prop 400 plan. The half-cent sales tax effective January 2006 through December of 2025 has distinct bus and rail components and programs with guiding principles, procedures, and board policies to ensure that that program is fully balanced over the life of that tax. In the upcoming slides, I'll provide an overview of the origin of the jurisdictional equity, or JE, as we know it, as it relates to the Great Recession, the reason why we're here to recommend this change, which is really based upon member city input and a board request, and the April board policy change and clarification on the existing Prop 400 funding. The TLCP policies were originally approved by the RPTA Board of Directors in 2005. The policy change that we're discussing today really relates to guiding principle number 6, jurisdictional equity, and it's only applicable to the RPTA bus program, so it does not impact Valley Metro Rail. So a few years after the board had approved those policies I just mentioned, the Great Recession of the late 2000s occurred. This is very significant for the plan. We just started that plan, had anticipated approximately $5 billion in revenues over a 20-year period. However, due to that recession, we lost about $2 billion of funding from our program. So really that was what resulted in the creation of the Transit Life Cycle Program Working Group, which is really made up of member city staff and facilitated by RPTA staff. The immediate scope was to propose policy changes to deal with this dramatic reduction in funding for our program. The board ultimately adopted a policy for jurisdictional equity to be maintained and established specific thresholds for RPTA in the subregions. So a little background on why we're here today. In June of 21, the board requested that we explore options to modify the existing JE policies and the thresholds. So we shared those policy options with the Audit and Finance Subcommittee in January of 22. Some of those options were, we could do nothing, no policy change. We could tighten the JE thresholds. We could loosen those thresholds, or we could remove the JE thresholds entirely. When we met with city staff to seek feedback on some of these options, they ultimately reached consensus on one potential change to that policy, which is not to allow any subregion to be over allocated. So with the current Prop 400 coming to an end at the end of calendar year 25, we did receive clarification from MAG that the existing Prop 400 rules will apply to any funds remaining at the end of this Prop 400. So we'll have to continue to use that jurisdictional equity. And so really this is the main driver of updating this policy to ensure that no subregion is over allocated, which essentially would be spending more than they're receiving. So as we get to the tail end, it becomes very important. So here's a snapshot of the current JE by subregion. Based upon the most recent TLCP that the board approved in April of this year. The total revenues for the 20-year plan are at $1.5 billion. allocated to the subregions. Column to the right of that, 1.484, that's the amount that's been programmed, right? So based upon your city staff input, we've programmed that through the end of the life cycle. We have 21.8 million unprogrammed right now. And so with the current policy, each subregion is within plus or minus 2.5% of their allocation. As you can see, they're all in the positive side. Current policy says that they can go even into the red. So the good news is, we're within the current policy, and with the recommendation that we're making, which I'll talk about on the next slide, we will still be within policy. So here's the existing policy and the recommended policy. The existing policy states that each subregion shall not exceed plus or minus 2.5% of the allocated transportation excise tax revenues. This means a subregion can spend more of their allocation and go into the red, drawing down up to 2.5% more than they have in their account, for example. So based on city staff input, the new policy that we're recommending tightens that up so that no subregion could be over allocated at all. So essentially staying in the positive between 0 and 2.5%. So with that, the recommendation is before you on the slide, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions from the committee? No questions. Any questions online? Not seeing any. I'm going to request a motion and a second to forward to the Board of Directors approval of a policy change to the TLCP Guiding Principle 6, jurisdictional equity, so that no subregions transportation excise tax revenues may be over-allocated while maintaining the other jurisdictional equity thresholds, allowing subregions to be underallocated up to 2.5% and limiting an individual jurisdiction's underallocation to a maximum of 7.5 million without that jurisdiction's expressed written consent. I'm going to ask for a motion on that. Oh, Mr. Melnichenko.
Sorry about that late hand. Just had a question. Would there be any policy change regarding the use of the jurisdictional equity, the funds, for instance, the city of Scottsdale, we run our own bus service here, trolley system, and we've been talking to staff over the years about being able to use some of those funds for our system, and was just wondering if those types of issues would be looked at in more detail, so that those opportunities for us to use some of those funds and keep at that 2.5% and under percentage for our system. That was just an item I wanted to bring up.
Okay, thank you for the question, Mr. Melnichenko. Per the regional transportation program, essentially we cannot use public transportation funding on non-regional routes, so specifically circulators similar to trolleys in the city of Scottsdale. If there's any other further information that we can facilitate, whether that's meeting with City of Scottsdale and MAG, we could discuss that further.
Did that answer your question? Do you have any follow-up? And Mr. Burke, I see you have a question. Oh.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Burke?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I also apologize for the late queuing in, but my quick question was, so is there a mechanism then that is laid out as far as how the balances of those under allocations will then be appropriated? Is it just then consensus of the board? Is it all pooled to a specific project, or how do you go forward with that balance?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Burke. So essentially through our transit lifecycle program, each year we update the inputs to that program, which is really based upon conversations with your city staff through service planning working group, as well as, so that's service related, as well as some of the capital replacements or capital activities, whether that's a park and ride or fleet needs. Public transportation funds provides the local match for those projects.
So then the goal is to end 2025 on the dot?
No, if there's any balance, any positive balance, we would continue to spend those funds under the direction of the existing policies for the existing Prop 400.
Okay, so it is spend till we exhaust that allocation in that sub-region as close as possible. Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other late questions? No? Okay, I'm not going to read the motion again. Do I have a motion? Second.
I'll make a motion. I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 3, the East Valley Fixed Route Service Contract Award. Ms. Nipper Miller, please introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'll provide you with a quick overview and I'll invite Tom Young to the podium to provide a presentation. We have been working to develop the East Valley Bus Operations and Maintenance Request for Proposals and move through the procurement process for some time. As a matter of history, this contract was originally set to expire on June 30th of this year. With the approval of the board and this committee, we did extend that contract for a period of 6 months. We found that was the maximum duration we could extend the contract without jeopardizing some of the federal maintenance funding that supports the maintenance portion of this operations and maintenance contract. We executed that 6-month extension so that it would provide us with time to focus on the management and the performance of the current contract, which it has. I'm pleased to report that performance in all areas of the East Valley O&M contract has improved. Today, we're sitting at about 0.3% of missed trips, which is still a little above the contract threshold, but significantly lower than the roughly 9% of missed trips we were experiencing a little over a year ago. We also used that time to take a fresh look at the draft scope of work. We did so by engaging WSP as a third party that worked with us, as well as peer agencies, to look at other contract approaches. We engaged with member city staff on a working group, and Mr. Young will provide you an overview of this. The result, though, was a request for proposals and a procurement process. I think that was more consistent with city's expectations moving forward. This is a big contract. Our last contract was 10.5 years. This contract would exist for up to 10 years. It's actually a 3-year base with option years of 4 and 3 years respectively. So we want to make sure that we get it right. We'll also, by the way, have a similar procurement process coming for the West Valley later this year. So now I'd like to invite Tom Young to the podium, and Tom, as well as Jonathan Thatcher, also new in his role, though not new to transit across Phoenix, is our Director of Contracts and Procurement. So Tom, please.
Thank you, Jessica. Chair Peters, members of the TMC. Today, I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the planning process we used to put the scope of work together and review some of the guiding principles of the project. We're going to talk a little bit about the evaluation committee coming together, the evaluation itself, or the evaluation criteria. We're going to talk 3 different service options that was included within the proposal, which each proposer had to submit on. And we'll also be talking about the evaluation and recommendation. So I'm going to start. The project itself is a contract award recommendation on the East Valley Fixed Route Bus Service, which actually includes 21 local routes, 8 express routes, 9 circulator routes, and 4 school trippers with 231 vehicles at peak pull time. So during the month of October 2022, Valley Metro hosted a series of 5 meetings with member cities and town staff to review and develop the scope of work. This effort was facilitated, as Jessica said, by our consultant, WSP. There were 5 driving pillars used in the development of this process. The first was a price structure. We had to develop a price structure that allowed contractors to propose on 2 different models. And I'll review those models in just a few minutes. The second pillar was performance standards. We identified areas of service that historically underperformed in the East Valley and developed the scope of work to ensure continued improvement as we move forward. Operator training was another area of focus at this point. In the RFP, we focused on defining outcomes and asked the proposers to tell us how you're going to meet those outcomes with operator training. We also focused on personnel, and on the personnel, we identified requirements for their key personnel. The local staff here, again, we identified outcomes and had the proposer tell us the staff necessary to meet those outcomes in the proposal. The fifth pillar, although I'm not going to talk about this today, we spent a lot of time discussing contract oversight and the responsibilities of Valley Metro as we move forward in the contract oversight of the selected vendor. So during the scope of work development process, we identified 5 areas for evaluating the technical capacity of each proposer. I'm not going to go into the 5, you can see them on the screen, but service quality and a high focus on customer service was the driving factor in the assignment of weights for each of the categories. The technical evaluation itself accounted for 80% of the contractor score. I'll get into the actual proposal evaluation in a few minutes, but wanted to emphasize the evaluation committee reviewed all technical proposals absent of any of the cost proposals. The cost proposals was a secondary step after we completed scoring the technical proposals. So the process itself, we released the RFP in November of 2022. The first step is we hosted an in-person pre-proposal meeting, which actually included taking all the prospective proposers on tours of the Mesa facility and the Tempe facility so that they were completely familiar with not only the service that we were requesting, but the assets that they would be required to maintain under this contract. The evaluation committee was finalized and non-disclosure agreements signed, which included 1 Valley Metro employee, 1 each representative from the city of Chandler, Mesa, and Tempe, and the town of Gilbert. Other Valley Metro subject matter experts were a part of the review of the technical proposals. However, they did not score those proposals. As referenced a little bit earlier, one of the pillars was to develop the pricing tool that allowed for contractors to propose 2 different service options. Option A was the unified service, which is maintaining the existing operations and maintenance of the contractors as one contract. The second service, or option B and C, was to separate and have a contract dedicated out of the Mesa operation, and Valley Metro would be overseeing that contract, and then a separate contract under the Tempe base of operations, and the city of Tempe would be managing that contract. So I'm going to review real quick just an evaluation process and an outcome, or the specific technical scores on the next slide. But right now, I just want to, on a high level, go over the differences in the cost between the service option pricing. So looking at the pricing is, if you looked at the unified cost versus the 2 separate operations and management of the contracts, the unified cost came in about 9.4% less than what operating of the 2 separate contracts would have cost. At that point, the decision to maintain the unified approach of the operations and maintenance was made, so we have moved forward with the final evaluation of the unified service contract. The process and outcome, all proposers were required to submit on all service options. We received proposals from 6 firms. After the acquisition of First Transit by Transdev was completed, Transdev chose to withdraw their proposal and keep the proposal of the incumbent provider, First Transit. One other proposal received was determined to be non-responsive, so leaving 4 proposers to evaluate. Proposers were instructed to submit their proposal in 2 separate filings, which I mentioned earlier, the technical and the cost. And the technical proposal was completely scored and ranked of all proposals prior to looking at the cost. Once we completed that, the technical scoring, the cost proposal was opened. Valley Metro finance staff did an analysis of that and then submitted the analysis to the the evaluation committee for final scoring of the proposals. For a quick review of the proposal term, which Jessica just mentioned, the base term of the contract is a 3-year term. The cost for that 3 years came in at $316,462,317,000. And then there's an option for a 4-year extension and another option for a 3-year extension. In the proposal we're moving forward, we did include a 5% contingency based off of the 3-year base term cost. The contingency is included only as contract authority to ensure that as we go through the years, we have the sufficient authority for this contract without having to come back for asking for more money. So staff is recommending for the TMC to forward to the board approval for the authority of the CEO to execute a contract with Keolis Transit Services. I am available at this time as other Valley Metro team members to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes.
First of all, I think we need to thank the evaluation committee. Evaluating proposals like this is it's not an easy task. And when you have, I think there were 12 of them, you have to review, and they're very technical and detailed. It's a lengthy process for that group to have gone through and committed to doing so. I think we need to thank them for their effort. And then secondly, from a city perspective, for the East Valley cities buying off this contract, we pay Valley Metro to operate on our behalf. So it's really important to us that Valley Metro now with this new contract get off on the right foot and really exercise all those tools in the contract management part of the scope of work to get the best deal, not only financially, but operationally for the cities that are paying for this service. And that includes the promises or proposals that were in the contract that rated Keolis high, making sure that Keolis upholds that part of the contract and fulfills that part of the proposal on behalf of the cities. So we wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Jody.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mark.
That's it. Thank you for the presentation and the lengthy process. Just wanted to tag on to the previous points made. For instance, Scottsdale has 2 major routes, Route 72 and 81, that are part of the contract, and we're looking forward to improved performance on these routes. Recently, we looked at the OTP data for the past few months, and Route 72 is performing at about 65%. really caught our attention. And we're hoping that, the new East Valley operator, Keolis, will really improve this situation. But we were kind of wondering, do we know what the underlying issues are? And in order to improve this, because I think this low OTP will only deter ridership on Scottsdale Road and on Hayden.
Thank you for that, the
Thank you.
question. We have fully analyzed that route at this time, and we do have some proposed changes coming up in the October service change. A lot of the poor performance at this time is driven by some of the traffic patterns that have changed, and a lot of the time points in between that area have been adjusted to hopefully improve the on-time performance immediately. We continue to watch it closely, but October, there will be time point changes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I just also wanted to express my appreciation to the evaluation team, as Jody mentioned, to Valley Metro staff. I know it was quite the process and it was under a tight time constraints. So that just added to the intensity of the work. So thank you for that. I also want to thank you for all the questions that you answered. I know that several cities submitted a lot of questions in advance that you guys provided solid answers to. Glad to see you've got a good plan in place for the transition, which is also under a very tight timetable. So looking forward to getting this moving forward.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I will request a motion in a second to forward to the Board of Directors approval to authorize the CEO to execute a contract with Keolis Transit Services for East Valley fixed route operations and maintenance services.
I'll make a motion to forward that lengthy recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Agenda item 4, report on current events and suggested future agenda items. Are there any reports on current events or any agenda items for future meetings from the committee? Okay. Number 5, next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 6th at 11 a.m. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. On to the
Yeah. I will convene the Rail Management Committee meeting. So we'll start with the consent agenda, which is items 1A through 1F or 1E. Does anyone have any questions on the consent agenda? All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Jody?
I'll second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion passes unanimously. That's really our agenda. So the item 2 is the report on current events and suggested future items. Any reports or suggestions for future items? Hearing none, we'll go to the next to announce the next meeting, September 6th at 11 a.m. Thank you, everybody. That adjourns our meeting.
Thank you.